I have posted earlier YouTube videos with regard to borderline personality disorder, and I can tell by the number of people who have looked at those videos that there's a great deal of interest in borderline personality disorder, particularly as it relates to an application for Social Security disability benefits. My name is Jim Herman. I have represented claimants for people applying for Social Security disability for the past 25 plus years, and offer some what I believe are unique insights and approaches to help folks who are applying for Social Security disability. That's particularly the case with regard to borderline personality disorder. And I think the most significant message that I have today is that um, adjudicators, administrative law judges, people who make decisions at the Social Security Administration simply do not understand how serious and how debilitating borderline personality disorder is. I know from working with these adjudicators and administrative law judges, they tend to just look at the what's called the listings for just personality disorders. But borderline personality disorder is much, much more severe than just a typical personality disorder. In my earlier YouTube videos, I have talked about the fundamental definition, fundamental understanding of borderline personality disorder. Of course, according to the American Psychiatric Association, it was simply until 1980 categorized as a personality disorder. And as I indicated, the administrative law judges and folks at the Social Security Administration still tend to look at this disorder as just a typical personality disorder, which is a gross error and a gross mistake by the adjudicators. And so it's my job to make sure those folks understand, and in other words, to not only educate you, but to educate the decision makers with regard to just how serious this disorder is. As we know, it originally came from, and I'm quoting right at the moment, it's always been considered a severe form of mental illness, and it was considered to be on the borderline. That's where the term borderline comes from. The borderline between psychosis and neurosis. That's where the terminology comes from. At one time, people thought that neurosis were thought to be treatable, while people with psychosis were thought to be untreatable, and we know that's not the case anymore. And but a person with borderline personality disorder, or BPD as it's abbreviated, those folks tend to, through no fault of their own, they tend to see things in extremes, and their feelings can change quickly and rapidly. And so it's really fundamentally about emotional dysregulation rather than being psychotic, neurotic, or something on the borderline between them. And of course, we also know, as the literature, the professional literature, substantiates that borderline personality disorder is often underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. People with BPD are often misdiagnosed as having other forms of mental illness, such as bipolar disorder and things of that sort. They might have at the same time depression, anxiety, eating disorders, PTSD, or substance abuse disorder. Administrative law judges and other decision makers at the Social Security Administration tend to not fully understand just how debilitating borderline personality disorder is for a person. Debilitating, if we look at the fundamental definition, it means causing serious impairment of strength or ability to function due to debilitating pain or debilitating fear, public speaking, or whatever. But when we're talking about a debilitating diagnosis, we're talking about someone who does have very serious impairment in their ability to cope with life and to cope with the relationships and the people they dearly love, and so significantly fear that they may lose those people, um, and just how debilitating and what a negative impact it has on their ability to function. And when we talk about function and Social Security disability, we are, of course, talking about the inability to work full-time. And all of Social Security's definitions turn on full-time employment. The professional literature does support the notion that folks who suffer from dysthymia, which is just kind of a fancy medical term for persistent mild depression, tend to be folks that are more likely to end up with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And of course, there are many other variables that enter into the total picture, if you will, with regard to what. It's not, I don't have the time, and you don't want to hear all of those because you know them, but you know everything from childhood abuse, sexual abuse, and all of the other mental health problems that could lead a person to ultimately have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, and the debilitating functional limitations that accompany that. I don't want to again repeat all of the symptoms that are secondary to borderline personality disorder, but just to mention and summarize a few of those again. And this, at the moment I'm quoting the National Institute of Mental Health, and but number one, of course, real or imagined abandonment, and the fear of lost relationships and cutting off communication with someone in anticipation of being abandoned. And then, of course, a pattern of intense and unstable relationships with family, friends, and loved ones, and a distorted and unstable self-image of sense of self. And then perhaps more significantly, from a safety and danger point of view, is the folks with borderline personality are more likely to engage in dangerous behaviors and abuse and reckless driving and binge eating and maybe spending sprees or unsafe sex, substance abuse, and the experts indicate that these behaviors occur primarily during times of elevated mood or energy, and they may be indicative of this disorder, this borderline personality disorder. And of course, we're all familiar, you're familiar with it if you're dealing with this diagnosis of self-harm, such as cutting and recurring thoughts of suicide attempts and thoughts, unfortunately, inappropriate and intense anger or problems controlling anger, and difficulty trusting people. And you know, the better that I do, the list goes on and on and on, because this is why you're having difficulty if you're dealing with these symptoms. But just to summarize, I want to keep this short so that I don't lose your attention. The really significant message today that I have is that decision makers at the Social Security Administration, at the agency, fail to recognize how serious this disorder is, and to differentiate it from other mental health problems and diagnoses. And it's a challenge to we have to be able to educate these decision makers as part of the representation and advocacy process. And I think that's the element that I can offer with regard to this sort of advocacy that others are not able to bring to the table, if you will. So you can reach me, as you may know, at 800-900-4440. You can email me at Herman Advantage, that's one R, two N's, HERMANN, Advantage, at gmail.com. And we'll be glad to obviously offer a free consultation at any time, and do whatever we can to help you qualify for disability benefits, because with that you may have greater access to medical care as well that can help you return to a more normal, a more productive and happier life. But I thank you for viewing. I thank you for listening, and if you haven't already done so, please click the red subscribe button that you see on almost any YouTubes nowadays. So I wish you the best, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.